Howdy hackers, and welcome to another episode of FairLight TV. Today we're going to talk about cartridges. So the C64 has an expansion port in the back where you can plug in one of those cartridges. An extra module that contains RAM, ROM or some sort of software that would allow you to improve on the basic functionality of the C64. It could be a game, it could be a utility cartridge, or some sort of additional function that you want for some sort of purpose. The original games, these are both Super Games and Omega Ray 64. So these are very early, and to be honest, cartridges didn't really, well, games on cartridges didn't really catch on the C64 like it did on other platforms. Presumably the reason was that these cartridges were rather difficult to manufacture or rather expensive to manufacture. So my own assumption is that it was cheaper to distribute it via tape and disc, and that was the reason that was pushed. That's a predominant way of pushing software. But they do have a key significant advantage, and that would be that loading times are basically zero because you can just swap memory around rather than reading it over the very, very slow tape interface and the very, very slow disk interface. All right, so the purpose of this is talking about the hacker tools distributed as cartridges. So you had a number of cartridges in different categories. First of all, you had the fast loaders, dedicated cartridges that provided a fast load from disk. Mac 5 and the Epix fast load are predominant in this category. They basically contain no other functionality than the speeding up the loading from disk drive. So they don't categorize as sort of a hacker cartridge for this purpose. Then you had the dedicated freezer cartridges like the Ice Pick and the Freeze Frame. The purpose of those were to press a button and then the content of the memory was stored to disk. So it's like cracking a game, but a layman's version of cracking a game. You just did a copy of the memory and stored it into some sort of bootable file on the disk drive. I guess they serve their purpose, but they are not hacking cartridges because they didn't allow you to do any cracking, any real cracking, because you couldn't inspect memory, you couldn't trace the running program, you couldn't do anything. It was just press of a button and save. And of course, they only handled the kind of software that was all in the running memory of the program at the time when you pressed the button. If you wanted to load an extra level, you were out of luck. That needs that you modify the program. So we don't categorize those as sort of hacker cartridges either. They are simply not competent enough for that purpose. And then we can say that we have the utility cartridges without the hacker aspect to it. The final cartridge 2 and 3, very nice utility cartridges. The machine code monitor is fine. The basic wedge is absolutely fine. The speed loader is absolutely fine. But they miss the basic key, the key component that you need to be able to call it a hacker cartridge. It should be something where you could freeze, inspect the memory, and resume. In the very early days of hacking cartridges, we couldn't have that requirement. But the time when the final cartridge 3 arrived, there are competing cartridges with memory in them, with RAM in them, so you can actually make near perfect freezes into the monitor, modifying the game while it's running, and then resume without the game basically knowing it was tampered with. So for this reason, the final cartridge 2 and 3, they're also out of the hacker cartridge category because they're not up to par on the hacking aspects of it. So what do we want to do? Well, yeah, we want to inspect the memory. We want to be able to inspect all of the memory. We don't want anything to be trashed at any point in time. And if we look at the history, this is CCS Mon, computer brain cracking software services. Computer brain cracking services, yeah. So PHS, Per Håkan Sundell, who is also the producer of the very nice emulator CCS 64. He was PHS of Computer Brain Cracking Service, and this was his tool that he did. This is a pure 8K ROM. You can turn it on and off. And the really cool thing with this one, first of all, it was super early. It was what everybody was using when I first started using my 664, and I never really needed to use this because there are, well, we did see alternatives on the market when I started hacking, so I never needed to use this one, but I do see the advantages when there are nothing else. So you can have it off. There's also this little diode there, so you can see if it's on or off, but you turn it off, then you boot your game, and the game cannot see that the cartridge is there. Then you turn on the cartridge, and then if everything is set up properly, you could press the reset button and you would enter the monitor here. And also it was programmed to make a copy of the lowest part of memory, the part of memory that is normally lost when you press the reset button, from 0 basically up to the end of screen memory, 7FF. 07FF, yeah. So this was really cool in that aspect, that it could preserve the lower part of memory, and it could then, well, you could inspect the running memory as it was when you press the reset button, and you could actually find out how the tape loader was working or whatever you wanted to hack using this one. So very early, very obsolete, but still very cool for its time. So we call this like the generation 1, 8K ROM and no RAM into it. The second part would be some sort of a generation 2. So this is the Expert cartridge. It's actually a rather modern one because it has this additional button on it. So this one is, I would imagine, only 8K of RAM, but it's RAM. So you can fiddle the switch. So you put it in program mode, and then you run a program on your computer, and then it stores something here, which is sort of the hacking software, and then you can turn it off as that. Yeah, so it's on, off, and program. So it has the same sort of switch, but it goes 3 ways because it also has this program mode. The monitor in this one was absolutely brilliant. It supports illegal opcodes. It supports, I mean, it's a really, really good machine code monitor. Probably the best one that's been written for the system. But this one has a significant disadvantage, and it doesn't feature any fast loader whatsoever. Oh, this didn't either, but this, by the time this one came out, you sort of expected it to have some sort of utility function, and the space in this wasn't big enough to support both like a full utility cartridge and also the hacking capabilities of it. I know a number of people that use this. They needed to have some sort of software, hardware-based speeder like the Jiffy DOS or any parallel loading system in their computer. If you had that, then this one didn't need to have the speed loader. You already have that in the machine. I found this to be a bit fiddly. I tended to kind of flip over to the programming mode, and suddenly the content of my cartridge was gone. So I had to reprogram it a number of times. So whereas the ID is absolutely brilliant and the support tools that was provided with it were really, really good as well, I found it to be a bit too messy, even if it was really, really competent. So the Expert. This one has one of those, what do you call them, ESM. I think this is the ESM button, which is a dedicated freezer button. The first generation, you just smash the restore button. And yeah, so this is also kind of second generation. Sea Wolf. No, it's not a game. This is actually my Action Replay. So Action Replay was competing with the Expert in the same market, but this has the advantage that it's sort of the full utility cartridge with fast loader and basic wedge and a number of utility disk copier, file copier. It's a rather complete set of tools in a very small box. And it also has a freezer button where you can enter a machine code monitor, you can fiddle with the program while it's running, and then you can start running it again. So you pause the program and you fiddle with it, and then you resume. Works almost flawlessly. There are a number of ways where you can detect it and sort of make it crash. But most of the programs didn't have any sort of protection against it. And you can also kind of start it in like an invisible mode, like turning the switches off on those. And upon doing so, I mean, there are rather few programs that could detect them then. So this is still my favorite from back in the days. Well, mentioning a few of the others, there was something called Nordic Power. It was basically a rip-off of the Action Replay. It's said that you can use the same ROMs, so the same software that comes on this. You can place it on the Nordic Power and it would actually work. I haven't tried that one, so don't hold me accountable for any information on it. Please read if you want, or if you are interested in details on it. Super Snapshot. My view on that was that is a utility cartridge which is also very good for inspecting program, and so it's a really good hacking cartridge as well. I have used one for a few days. I could borrow one from a friend and it looked very competent and it acted very competent, but I'm not the person to tell. One of the other YouTubers, Robin, has a channel where, and I know that he has Super Snapshots. So if you want any relevant information on Super Snapshot, I think he is the guy that you should talk to about that, not me. Sorry. There was another one, a German one called Magic Formel. Also seemed very competent, but it had software that wasn't really stable. On Poke Finder there is a go through of a number of the cartridges, and they point out a number of the occasions where Magic Formal would just bomb or not find things when you hunt for them in memory. Stuff you can't really expect from something you need to kind of lean on as your main vehicle for your activity on the C64. You couldn't just have that just bomb on you for any sort of reason. Okay, looking at sort of a generation 3, I do have this one. My Turbo Chameleon is actually up there in a box. So these are two competing cartridges that work basically as Action Replays. They do have the retro replay software in them, both of them. But they also emulate disk drives, they emulate tapes, and they have a number of additional features. So they're not like only utility cartridges. They do a lot more than that. So the USB port here has this little USB memory, and on that you can have basically all C64 programs ever produced. USB memories are that big, or C64 programs are that small. Here you also see an Ethernet port, so it supports RRNet, or at least it supports Ethernet. So with this I can connect my C64 to my LAN, and I can remotely access it over FTP and send data to it. I'm not going to call it a version of that, but you also have the Ultimate 64, which is a full new FPGA based board. It has one of those cartridges built in, so this is why I don't use this one. I have my Ultimate 64 on the other side of the FairLight logos on there. But this, if you're going to run the native hardware today, this is probably what you want to have, because this is the best cartridge that gives you full C64 and full 1541 emulation. You don't need a disk drive if you have this one. It's absolutely brilliant. But what do we do? What do we use today? Well, I'm sorry, I'm not running the native hardware that much, so I don't use this one that much, and I don't even use my Ultimate 64 that much. I use the built-in machine code monitor in the Vice emulator, because all these are freezers that work inside the emulated environment. Vice monitor is a shell outside of the emulated environment, which means that it could be absolutely invisible to the running system. There is no way the running system could tell that a monitor had been in and inspecting the running state of the program. There is simply no way to do that. So and you can have so many things in that scope that were not simply possible using one of the old ones. First of all, if you have a running program on the disk drive, so where the computer sent a little piece of code to the disk drive, that is invisible to those programs, because the disk drive does not respond to any of the normal commands anymore, because it's fully preoccupied with running that little software it has on it. Let's say the host of a speed loader. You can't set any freeze points in the disk drive with this. You can't set it in the computer, but you actually change parts of the memory. So if there is a memory CRC or checksum routine, it can actually detect that you fiddle with the memory if you set the freeze point with this one. If you use the machine code monitor in Vice, you can set super flexible breakpoints. You can checkpoints on load and store and execute, and you can set them in the computer and you can set them in the disk drive. So, I mean, just being able to set a freeze point inside the disk drive feels like cheating, but it's the kind of cheating I'm very keen to do, because it's so super competent to be able to do that, and you can do so many things with it that just wasn't possible back in the days. I think that was everything I wanted to say about cartridges, hacker cartridges for the C64. So, but if you sit with the Final Cartridge 3 and you think that is great, that shows that you are no low-level hacker. That means that you are a competent user. So, congratulations to your cartridge. That is not the cartridge I would use anyway. Pressing the reset button and see this desktop chaos or Windows kind of environment trashing most of the memory just makes me sad. So TFC3, not my choice. This is what you want if you want to run the native, or you would want to use Vice emulator and then use the absolutely brilliant machine code monitor on there. So thank you for listening, and see you next on FairLight TV.